So in the beginning, everything was perfectly fine. I had just started my modest clothing brand from my home. I had previously had a nursery, and that part of my life just phased out as my kids grew up, because the main reason behind that was to have my kids with me as I worked. And as my kids grew up, I wanted to close down the nursery and kind of move on to something different. I had spent several years doing that, and I saved up some money. So that money I used to start a clothing brand. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. I just wanted to kind of, make different designs and try different things out, improve the quality for sure. That was a massive thing I wanted to improve in comparison to what was already out there. And also, just because I was an average size and an average weight, I didn't really have issues with finding clothes in my size. But I had friends who were really, really short and really, really tall and plus size. And unfortunately, they could never find clothes that was ready made for them, of good quality, of good designs, fabric, and, a good variety to choose from. So that was my main kind of motivation behind starting a clothing brand. But I was not really sure what I was doing and where I was going with it. Anyway, Alhamdulillah, the modest clothing brand started to progress, and it started to grow, and it started to get quite big. So initially, my orders were a few £1,000s. Then my orders became, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 pounds at a time. And we're talking cost price. So this is, how much it would cost to actually make the products. By the time it grew to that point, I had, of course, made, good relationships with my suppliers, my manufacturers, and I had found manufacturers that were able to, produce what I wanted, because most of the things I made were custom made, very specific. And usually it's very, very costly to make custom made pieces. So I had built relationships and had suppliers that I could use that had very low MOQs, or low enough for me to be able to make several different designs in many different sizes, many different colors and styles. But slowly, I started noticing an inconsistency in the way the suppliers began to deliver the products. With clothing, usually, we make the designs and place the orders well in advance to when we actually need them. So for example, Ramadan and Eid, these are the most busiest periods for Muslim companies and Muslim businesses. So to get products in time for Ramadan and Eid, usually we'd place orders a whole season or 2 seasons in advance. That's like, a whole 6 months, half a year in advance, to make sure that they're delivered in time. But I began to notice that my suppliers just weren't delivering on time, no matter how early I placed the orders. And, if you know a thing or two about business, or at least, the biggest lesson I have learned in business is that time is really money. Now, if you're investing, 30 or 50,000 pounds into stock, you can't really afford to wait a very long period of time until you receive that stock. That stock needs to come as soon as possible. And the other thing that I learned in terms of, time being money is that once you receive your products, you can't really have your stock sitting on shelves. The longer your products sit on the shelf, the more money and profit you are losing as a business. Now, as my business grew much bigger, Alhamdulillah, Ukht London had to leave my house. So we ended up, I vlogged everything for you guys on YouTube, and we ended up moving into, warehouse/office, which is where I am right now. I had to hire staff because I could no longer run the whole business by myself. So these were fixed expenses now. Again, if you know anything about business, there are fixed expenses that have to be paid, your rent, your staff salaries, no matter what, whether you have stock, whether you don't, whether your products are selling or they're not, whether you have any sales coming in or you don't, fixed expenses have to be paid. Now, when suppliers are making promises that they cannot deliver on, that causes a massive, massive issue. And to be honest, any small business, even large businesses, go out of business just because of things like this. So after noticing these issues year after year, and noticing that even when I would place orders, 6 months in advance, for example, I wanted stock for the summer, and I wanted matching hijabs and niqabs in nice, beautiful pastel light colors for my sisters, and the suppliers would deliver them to me in time for winter. That was a massive, massive loss and a massive hit to the business. And this happened over and over and over again, consistently. And the reason this happens is simply because suppliers just say yes to everything. They just want to take on business, even business that they know they cannot handle. And they have many, many sisters just like myself that are placing orders, and they're just simply delaying and making promises they cannot stick to. And the main reason for this is because, they want the pound, they want the dollar. Anyway, through this process, I learned so many lessons, subhanAllah, through trial and error, trying so many different suppliers and manufacturers from so many different countries. My husband, being the business savvy man that he is and the well-connected man, he kept thinking and thinking, how could this problem be solved? So he decided to build a factory. Now, at the time, he was doing so many different businesses. He's always been involved in a variety of different businesses. And at the time, he was actually doing business in Pakistan by restoring and exporting classic cars. So he was traveling to Pakistan anyway for his classic car business. And he had an uncle that he was meeting there that he was doing business with. And they traveled from Karachi to Lahore to Islamabad to Peshawar to like literally around the whole Pakistan. And as he was talking to this uncle and him decided to put money together and invest into opening a factory, mainly for Oost London. They were going back and forth, looking for places, sending me videos in London and looking for staff, looking for people to refurbish the place so it's, in very good state. And of course, sourcing all the different types of machinery that's required, different machines, sewing machines, overlock machines, special ironing machines that they need. And as the work began in the place that they found and it was being refurbished and they were looking for the machinery, unfortunately, my husband and this uncle just simply did not click because the mentality of the people, abroad is very different to people in a Western world, you could say. I'll give you an example of the main clash that they had. They would drive, up and down 4 and 3 hours away to 4 to 5 different places just to find a machine that's cheaper. Now, wasting 3-4 hour journeys several times just to find something that was just a few pounds cheaper when you convert the money, to my husband just did not make sense. He would rather, again, going back to the money is time, to my husband, his time, his, 8-12 hours of time is way more expensive than saving £3. And on top of that, when you count the petrol you're wasting, driving up and down, trying to find a machine that's cheaper, sometimes it's actually better to just pay those extra few pounds instead of wasting those extra few pounds, or if not more, on the petrol you're spending to go and get it. So that to my husband just did not make sense, nor did the kind of the quality of work. In Pakistan, they're a lot more satisfied, a lot quicker with, a basic job. For my husband, he wanted everything the best machines, the best people, the best tailors, the best place, everything the best. Because, we believe in quality. And the other thing is they look at a younger person as if like, hey, like, what do you know? You don't know anything. You're young. You're just a little boy. Even though my husband is a fully grown man. But they just have that mentality that, an older person knows everything and the younger people don't know anything mentality. And that just could not work with my husband. He had full respect for the uncle and, he was polite and respectful and everything, but he had to pull the plug on the whole thing. He just could not do it anymore. And he took a massive loss in this project. Not only the loss of money, but like the loss of morale and kind of just feeling down at the whole thing. So then my husband ended up, returning home after several months of pursuing this project and it not going forward and not actually, being complete. By then, I had no choice but to already have built new relationships with new suppliers and manufacturers. So at this time, some of you may remember, we ended up producing some new products and designs in Turkey. And the fabrics were amazing. The quality of work, especially the brother we were working with, was absolutely amazing. He really went out of his way for us. But unfortunately, the reality of working with Turkey was that the fabric is mostly imported into Turkey, which means they are charged massive taxes on the fabric already alone. So producing modest wear in Turkey turned out to be super, super expensive. And unfortunately, that's just not what I wanted for my sisters, because at the end of the day, I believe that modest clothing should be affordable and good quality. So this definitely was not a sustainable solution. It was just a very temporary solution. Also, on top of that, if you guys remember, all of that stock from Turkey was stuck and completely lost by UPS for around 3 months, a whole season again. So even though it was nothing to do with Supplier, now it was the shipping company that had fully delayed, even though I paid extra thinking, yes, it's UPS, it's a reputable, delivery company. Yeah, it just did not work out at all. So the problem was not solved. The problem was still there and it still needed solving. So at this point, my husband had returned to the UK. And as I said, the problem was not solved. So he kept thinking of how he could solve this problem. And deep down inside, he knew that the only way this would ever be solved is if he just does everything himself. So initially, when the option of opening our own factory came up, we had several choices. We could either rent premises to open a factory in, or purchase land and build a factory on it. But the third option, that was my preferred option, but unfortunately my husband did not go ahead with it, was to build a factory on his family's land, because my husband is from Pakistan originally. He is from Peshawar, which means he's a Pathan. In his mind, building on his land was simply not a choice, because as you know, most families have some sort of drama going on. And to be honest, because he wasn't born in Pakistan, he just saw the land as, you know, nothing to do with him. He had no desire for it or any sort of desire to build anything on it in the first place. He never has. But when he visited Pakistan, one of his uncles actually offered and said, look, I know what you're trying to do, but why don't you just take this land behind my home? It's the family's land, and build the factory here. At the end of the day, this is the family land, and you have every right to the land. And although that was never an option in my husband's mind, me being like the risk-averse type of person, that was the option I was praying he would take from the beginning. But that was not the option he tried to run to from the beginning. He tried to do it somewhere else, you know, away from the family. But he sat down and he thought very, very hard. And he realized after his uncle offered to use the land behind his home, he realized that, you know what, there is massive, massive benefit to building this factory on this land. Not only will it benefit London as a brand, as a business, not only will it benefit, you know, us as a family in terms of stability, but it will actually benefit the whole family and generations to come, because this is something that will remain there, which, to be honest, is why I preferred that option in the beginning. Because again, you know, I'm a risk-averse person, so I knew that yes, it would take a massive investment from the beginning to build a factory ground up from nothing but soil and mud. But at the end of the day, that investment is solid. Even if at the end, you know, London doesn't use it or whatever, it's a massive solid investment that can be used for so many different things, and so many different businesses can come from that, not just to supply London. So at this point, my husband traveled to Pakistan again. And, you know, having this one uncle that actually took him seriously in a way that most of the elders don't take younger people seriously. And he began this project from the ground up. There was nothing but mud, nothing but soil in the middle of a village in Swabi, Peshawar, Pakistan. Now, if you look at the history of Swabi, mainly Pakistan, in Peshawar, you will see that the traditions of Pathans there, especially Swabi in particular, they have a beautiful, beautiful history, especially when it comes to hijab. They take hijab very, very seriously. Yes, they don't, you know, cover their feet because they follow like the Hanafi school of thought. But in terms of hijab, they have such a beautiful history. If you look up the Swabi garment called the chel, this is the traditional garment that's usually white with red dots or black with red dots. Now I think they, you know, add a couple other colors as well, but traditionally it was white with red dots. And this is because traditionally the women would take their chel, their white garment, and put it over their husbands who became shaheed. And the garments would stain and the blood would dot around on these white cloths. And they would then, after burying their husbands, they would continue to wear this chel and cover themselves in it after, with the marks on it, in a very proud way. This was a thing to be proud of. So traditionally, they still do wear this garment called chel, and I'll link it down below, inshallah, so you can have a read. So building the factory in Peshawar Swabi is just like a perfect place, you know. We're around people who really appreciate, understand, and know the importance of the woman's haya and the woman's parda, as they call it, you know, the veil, the covering. So now my husband is in the middle of Swabi, where he did not grow up. Yes, his family is from there, but he did not grow up there. He was not born there. He actually is as British as it gets. He doesn't even really eat the traditional Pakistani food. So he was really struggling there. As you can imagine, you know, going abroad, often you get sick from the water, from the food. The food tastes completely different. I'm not sure, maybe, you know, my theory is that the meat over there was actually more organic and more natural. And we over here are very, like, you know, kind of sterilized and bleached. So he could not get used to the food there at all. Like the most he could eat was like the dal and the rice because the auntie would cook it really, really well. But generally, you know, the taste of the meat, he could not get used to it. And he would travel hours and hours away to like the nearest KFC to try and taste something a little bit more similar to what we have here in the UK. So throughout this project, this is probably the biggest struggle that he had, you know, being sick and, you know, not being able to eat properly, hay fever, like the whole lot. And he gets it really, really bad. So he had to persevere through so much hardship over there. On top of that, staying away from your family, your children for so many months. It took him 8 months, and he has never, you know, done a massive building project, not from ground up anyway. He's done, you know, property refurbishments, but this was something completely different and in a completely different country. Like the way people build in the UK or, you know, in the Western countries or European countries, as a matter of fact, is completely different to how they build over there. They literally make their own ladders. I was shocked. Being Eastern European, you know, all our family are always like carpenters and builders and, you know, stuff like that. So my mum found it very interesting to actually watch the videos and see how things get built over there in Pakistan. But yeah, for my husband, this was something completely new. He has never ever taken on such a massive building project. He's never built anything. He's never, let alone a factory, right? There's machinery that's involved. There's so much that's involved. But still yet, he designed every single aspect of this. He designed every single pillar that was in this place, every single socket. Like, for example, again, the mentality thing came up where they were like, no, 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 you have to put all the switches on the wall next to you as soon as you walk in. So it's got all the switches. And if you can imagine, you know, this is a massive factory. So, you know, we needed, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40 different light switches. There's no way you're going to walk in and try and play with every single button as soon as you walk in to put on maybe a specific light that you need. So little things like this, my husband really, really, you know, stayed firm on having it the way he wanted it. He wanted it to be made exactly how he wanted it made. So we implemented, you know, the sockets the way we normally would have it in the UK, so that every single station had sockets right next to them. Every single station, every single section within the factory had light switches right next to them, so it's a lot more convenient, a lot more practical, so it saves a lot more time and is a lot more efficient during, you know, the operational times. And again, he had to, you know, drive around and even fly around pretty much the whole of Pakistan to source all of these machines. You know, he wanted the best of the best machines. He wanted spotlights and things like having, you know, a massive cutting table to hold the fabric, or having a machine that's gonna, like a saw type of machine that you cut the fabric with. You know, he got everything to make this place super efficient and, you know, top notch. Basically everything was the best. Things like the cutting table, he had it custom made, a massive long cutting table, and he even made it like white on the top and black at the bottom, so it's all like color matching. The whole factory is absolutely spotless. It's all black and white. He had extra tall rails made similar to the one I've got over there, and you know, we made sure to have it extra tall so that, you know, the jilbabs, the abayas do not touch the floor. He had special steamers installed. These are like, you know, these massive steaming machines that, you know, they have an iron, but the pressure that's coming out of them is, yeah, it's dangerous. And yeah, the whole place was just covered in marble on the floor, white panels on the walls. Yeah, everything was just super white and black and minimalistic, you could say. Everybody was shocked at what it turned out to look like. Even the family members were coming over and they were really, really surprised because, as I said, they don't usually take the youngsters seriously. They don't take younger men seriously over there. And this brings me on to the other point as well, where my husband ended up choosing a very particular young man that he saw so much potential in when he employed him as the manager of the factory. And again, trusting this young man, he saw qualities in this young man that he did not see in anybody else. He was ambitious, he was on point, he was quick, he was sharp. And initially, I wasn't really happy about him leaving university, because this young man had to leave university to become a manager at the, you know, Ukht London factory. But when I found out that what he was studying was business, I said, you know what? That's perfect, because to be honest, university teaches you theory business. I studied business management in university, and the best way to learn business is by actually doing it. So by this point, my husband had systemized everything within 8 months. Everything was built, everything was spotless and clean and organized. He even made like a custom cupboard for all the threads to be stored in, you know, with like a glass at the front. So pretty much everything was like customized and made and tailored to exactly what he wanted it to look like. He had a massive ramp with a massive sliding doors, which makes the delivery a lot easier to, you know, to deliver the fabrics to the factory, to, you know, when it comes to exporting the goods back to London in boxes. He even thought about where he's going to put the windows, and all the windows were actually made all the way at the top of the building so that, you know, sunlight can come through, but also always thinking about, you know, theft and robberies there as well, crime. Of course, there's massive, you know, expensive machinery being stored there overnight. So he left the place at a point when it was basically able to run from one phone, literally just one phone. And just having little systems in place, like for example, when we make garments and there's fabric that's left over, and the fabric is, you know, some of the best pieces out of what's left over that are, you know, massive solid chunks. They are given to the local women who end up sewing clothes for themselves and for their children. So now, as of today, April 2024, it's been almost a year since the factory had begun to get built. And so far, we've had around 40 people come through those doors. So currently, as of today, we have 14 people working there, and they are being paid the best salaries that people over there get paid for those roles. But we continue to always trial new people to try and build a team of the best tailors that we could possibly find. Quality has always been like the #1 priority for Ucht London Clothing. So we have 2 staff just on quality checking. All they do is just make sure every single piece is absolutely immaculate. You know, the stitching is straight and precise and no extra unnecessary threads hanging. The designs, the sizing, everything has to be spot on. All they do is just check for quality. Now, I have always wondered why like my abayas and my jilbabs would rip and tear so easily. And I always wondered, like, is there different types of threads? Is there different quality of thread? And my suspicion was actually correct, because when my husband began to source fabric and threads and stuff like that, we found out that yes, there are threads that are super cheap and tear very easily. Same with the fabric. And you know, knowing us, we want the best, especially for our customers. So we always go with like the stronger thread and the best type of thread that there is, so that it's durable and it lasts and it does not tear, you know, easily like everybody else. So this whole process shined a light on how other manufacturers and suppliers cut corners, because at the end of the day, if it's all about money for them, then they get the cheapest threads that they possibly can. We've also been told by the tailors how usually factories cut corners in the way that they even sew to minimize the amount of thread that they are using when they're producing garments. So for us, everything is double stitched. We have like the maximum thread overlock machine that we use for the overlocks. And if you've ever looked at garments, sometimes things are overlocked and it looks a little bit scruffy and not very neat. And some garments have like single stitches where ideally in places they should really have double stitching. But this saves them a lot of thread and therefore saves them a lot of money. So with Ucht London garments, what we do is we have everything double stitched, super neat. We've actually just recently invested in a new machine that actually does the double stitch at the same time, so that it's super neat, super clean, super tidy and precise and accurate. Finally, once the workers started to come in and began to work at the new factory, my husband kept stressing to them the importance of their intention, because at the end of the day, we are making modest clothing here. We are making the hijab, something Allah has made fard. Now, imagine how much ajr they would get if they make an intention every single day, every time they come into work, and make an intention that they are doing this for the sake of Allah. Not only are they getting an amazing salary, you know, and all of this, and they're working in an amazing, clean, modern looking place, they potentially could be earning so much ajr every single day with every single niqab, every single jilbab they are making. So my husband stressed to them the importance of their intention and to not lose the potential reward that they could be getting. And in terms of the culture that we are building in this factory, my husband stressed to every single person, every single worker that comes through those doors and says, if you're not making this with love, then you do not belong here. So even if you look at the Ucht London labels, the wash label, it says made with love by Ucht London. So this is one of the most important things that we stress in the whole company. is that if you don't have actual love and good intention for what we are trying to do here, then unfortunately you just simply don't belong here. Because this whole thing is not just for us, and it's not just to make money. This is a generational thing. This is a community thing. This is something so much bigger than just to have a business that makes a little bit of money. Which brings me on to my last and final point. Keep an eye out on this channel, inshallah, because we have a lot of things coming. Some really, really exciting things. And inshallah, you'll soon find out how you could also be involved in the growth of Ukht London. And if you wanted to, it could be something that could come into your town, into your home, and support your family, inshallah. So, Jazakallahu khairan for listening, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.